Hi everybody. Give us just a minute for people to join. Hi everybody. We'll give just a minute for people to join. All right, well, thanks for joining me for Tina Talks Finance. Today we're going to talk about what to do when the month exceeds our money. No matter how hard we try, some months' expenses will just be more than we're able to bring home. And this does not make you a failure, but it is something we need to change our plans to accommodate. It just means that we need to make some decisions to make sure the upcoming month's expenses are within our means. The first thing to remember is that when our budget is operating in the red, meaning we are spending more than we're earning, that can only be a temporary situation. Otherwise, it gets worse. No matter how much planning someone does, not having enough money will always lead to disaster if it is not curtailed quickly. I'm going to share 4 things you need to know about your rights as a consumer and what to do in a budget that doesn't work with your income. Increasing income is not always getting a second job. If the problem is temporary, then you might want to find a more temporary arrangement. This is your chance to be creative. If you have a coveted skill, you could teach for a fee. Did your grandmother teach you how to crochet or do beadwork? These are coveted skills that people are willing to learn, they're paid to learn. Perhaps hosting a group or making a few items to sell could bring in enough money to cover the gap in that month's expenses. Something past generations did also that we don't do much now is bartering. If you trade favors with someone to replace a service you pay for, then sometimes that can help you cover the expenses well. This would be something like if a trusted neighbor needed their lawn mowed and you need a babysitter, maybe you could trade favors and you can mow their lawn and they can babysit for you in return. Then we have the other side, because when we don't have enough money, the only 2 things we can do is increase income or decrease expenses. And so we talked about how to increase income. So the other is the less fun alternative, which is decreasing expenses. And we explored in a previous session how to determine our needs from our wants, but that's not always easy. But if you need help, please search the hashtag Tina Talks Finance and watch the needs versus wants session. This can make these hard decisions a little less painful. Remember, if this is a long-term expense, it may mean some permanent cuts. So be sure that whatever you choose is a decision you can live with long-term or short-term, and know which decision you need to make. If we're not able to solve the problem of being overextended from the beginning, then we may end up in a situation where creditors begin to call. The most important thing to remember is to keep calm. Humans are more likely to help people they like, and bill collectors are just that, they're humans. They try to stay professional, most of them do. However, sometimes our emotions get the best of us, so try to stay professional. But it is okay to be firm when you need to be. However, yelling at them will not help your situation. I have seen people get into screaming matches with creditors, and it never works out in the client's favor. So just try to stay professional and keep it on a professional level. Don't ever trade insults, because neither one of you are going to walk away with a solution. So what I often tell people is to try to place yourself in the creditor's shoes. Imagine your cousin borrowed $10,000 from you and didn't pay. How would you try to collect? Would you try to be understanding at first if they let you know? Probably. But what would that money mean for your financial stability? Because lenders seem too large to fail doesn't necessarily mean that is true. Lenders are just businesses that rent money to consumers, and that rent is called interest. If enough people do not pay, the lender will be forced out of business and that collector will have no job. And these collectors know that. And most of the time it's incentivized to get you to pay. They are relying on you to resume payment so they can continue to provide for their families. So maybe catch them just a little bit of break, but don't put up with the harassment. Remember, you have all of the control because you have that nice little end button. You can hang up anytime that it's not in your favor. But next, please don't ignore calls from your creditors. When you stay in touch with your lenders, you are less of a risk. The earlier you can call to make arrangements, the more time creditors have to be amazing. Sometimes there's a lot that lenders can do to help you, and most of the time we want to help you. But if you only give us 1 day's notice, there's not as many things that we can do to help in those situations. So if you know that you will be a week late in advance, give them a few days to work for you. Maybe they can give you some deferments. Maybe there's a hardship program that they can put together for you, but they will need time to coordinate that. And sometimes they need to get that approved by their bosses. And so if you give them time, most of the time they will try to be amazing for you. But if you call the day your payment is due, there are not very many things that the lender's going to be able to do to help you. And this brings me to the last point on this subject. You have the right to limit when and where your collectors can stop or can call, or if you want to stop calls altogether. However, you do need to know that if you cut communication completely with your creditor, they are likely to escalate their collection efforts. However, if calling your place of employment could cause you to lose your job, then you have the right to ask them not to call you at work. I just recommend limiting the time and the place rather than stopping the calls completely so that nothing bad happens from just asking them to make it more convenient for you to take their calls. And this brings us to the last point. What are your consumer rights? The Fair Debt Collection Practices Act provides some basic rules to protect consumers from unfair debt collection practices. A few of the more important protections are limiting time creditors can call to the hours of 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. in the consumer's time zone, not the creditors. Consumers may authorize additional times if you want to, however, you are not required to. Collectors may not harass you or anyone else, including your references. They have to make limited contact with your references, and that is only to ask where you are and ask them to aid in help reaching you. Creditors are not allowed to send you a postcard regarding the delinquency and are not allowed to discuss the details of your account. They are simply only to ask references, again, to help locate you. They cannot say they are asking because your account is delinquent. Creditors must disclose the name of the creditor, amount owed, and provide you time, at least 30 days, to dispute the debt. The current creditor is different from, if the current creditor is different from the original, they're required to supply the name of the original upon request. So you have the right to ask who is collecting and who the original creditor was. For more information about the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, you can read the full act at the Federal Trade Commission's website, ftc.gov. And there are several summaries on the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's website, which is consumerprotections.gov. Complaints about violations should be reported to the Federal Trade Commission and the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is consumerfinance.gov. The reason is because the Federal Trade Commission is the regulation, and the CFPB fights, they use those regulations to fight to collect damages for people that have been affected by neglecting to follow the fair debt collection practice. Any questions about what I've told you today? If you have any questions, just put those into the chat.
Can collectors threaten me with my job or jail time? And is it legal for them to ask about my spouse?
One of those that I have a friend here that's telling me what your questions are, but that one was a little bit long. Can you break that down just a little bit?
Can collectors threaten me with my job or jail time?
Can my creditors threaten me with threaten my job or jail time? Absolutely not. Those are complete violations of the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. They are not allowed to harass you, and showing up at your work is considered harassment. You can ask them to stop. And as far as going to jail, not technically. Sometimes, if you were required to go to court and you don't show for your court date, then you could be held in contempt of court. So it's an indirect violation, but it can result in that. It's not normal for that to happen. What was the rest of the question?
Is it legal for them to ask about my spouse?
Is it legal for them to ask about my spouse? If they are not on the loan with you, it is illegal for them to talk about your loan or the details of your loan, or even confirm that you have a loan to your spouse. You, and I've said this before, you are two separate people in the eyes of the credit bureaus, and you are individual in the eyes of finance. You only are as combined as you make yourself. So if your spouse is on the loan with you, they can disclose anything, or all the details and anything they want to your spouse, because they are also responsible for that debt. However, if they are not on that loan with you, and I recommend not financing things together if at all possible, and it doesn't make a huge impact in the bottom line, I don't recommend financing things together, because it does combine you, and then you're both liable for it. So if one person can't make the payments, then the other person is liable, so you both go down with that ship.
What do I do if I have made the effort to stay in touch and my lenders refuse to work with me?
What to do if I've tried to stay in touch with my lenders, but they're not working with you? There are limited things that lenders have to provide. During COVID, we've had there are some programs that have never been rules that have never been applied before, such as with student loans for 90 days, there are no payments. Everyone, you don't even have to ask, there are just no payments for 90 days, because this is a nationwide pandemic. That is not normal. They don't have to provide, unless it's a mortgage. Really, they don't have to provide you anything. If you're late, you can lose your collateral. However, do remember that most lenders, the last thing they want are your things. So if you just call them and try to work something out, most of the time they're going to work with you. However, if it's a predatory lender, which are people that it's a low cost or high cost, low benefit loan, a lot of times they don't work with you like a traditional bank or credit union will. And sometimes it is hard to get them to work with you, and you have to know your rights. And you can always call our office at 405 878 4697. And if you have a quick question to ask of a credit counselor, we can always answer those for you.
Next question, what is a good amount to negotiate with creditors?
What is a good amount to negotiate with creditors? Well, negotiations, I would say the same thing every time. Start high, meet in the middle. So if you offer, or I guess in this case, it's start low and meet in the middle. So if you lowball them, then they will walk you up to the amount that they are able to offer you. However, remember that creditors, or not creditors, but collectors, they are sometimes contracted by the original creditor, and they won't let them take less than a certain dollar amount. And so sometimes those collectors will say, I have to go back to the original creditor and see if they'll take that. And most of the time they'll say, no, but we will take this amount. And sometimes that's lower than the amount that they said that they would go. However, they don't have to settle at all. It's not required by law. It's just a carrot to get you to pay so that they can close out the account. Something is always better than nothing in the eyes of lenders. Any other questions? I'll give you just a few minutes to put those in there, or a minute or so. Five, four, three, two, one. Any questions? Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed this edition of Tina Talks Finance. If you found this helpful, you can search hashtag Tina Talks Finance to view earlier editions. I hope you have a great week, everyone. Bye.